in this video, I am going to be talking about the decline of the player base of Dungeonborne, and basically just about how this game is not really doing so well right now. Instead of attracting players, it's just been kind of pushing a lot of players away. So I'm going to be saying why I think that is, and offering some suggestions on how this could maybe be turned around relatively quickly, because if it doesn't, then this Steam charts graph right here is just going to keep going down instead of going back up, which is really what's going to need to happen for this game. So, we can see that right now, there's 10,000 players, the 24-hour peak was 16,000, and the peak last month, which is pretty much when the game launched, was 39,325. So, obviously, there's been, you can visually see a pretty big decline here. And the thing about this is I don't know if this is going to go back up at any point, but the reason that this has gone down is because life on hit hasn't been fixed. And today in particular, there was a patch for Dungeonborne. Actually, I think it was yesterday at the time this video is going to go live, but yesterday there was a patch for Dungeonborne, and basically the patch just didn't address what it needed to address, which was going to be Death Knight and Cryomancer being very, 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 very powerful classes when they have life on hit. Additionally, Swordmaster is kind of up there, but not as much. And Cryomancer wasn't nerfed at all. Death Knight was nerfed a bit, but also buffed a bit, so it kind of cancels each other out. And so everything's still at exactly the same place, and life on hit wasn't changed at all. This both makes the meta feel very, very stale, so you know, there's not really much else to try out at the higher levels, because everyone's just going to be running Death Knight and Cryomancer with life on hit, because that's going to be extraordinarily powerful. So it hasn't changed the meta, and changing the meta for games always feels like it makes the game more fresh, you know? So like if Death Knight and Cryo were nerfed, then maybe people would start playing like Pyromancer, or maybe they'd even start playing Priest more frequently or something, which does make the game feel fresher, because if you're trying out a new class, it's something somewhat new and something somewhat different, and that gives the game a little bit more replayability. But that hasn't happened. Death Knight is still very powerful, and the Cryomancer is still very powerful as well, even without life on hit, but with life on hit they're just absolute killing machines, and there's really not going to be a whole lot you can do against them if you don't have life on hit either. So the fact that life on hit wasn't addressed in this patch is really not a good sign, because it's really not going to be that difficult at all to simply disable life on hit until they fix it. Like it's literally just going to be, if you have life on hit in your inventory, then you know you can't enter the game. It's really not going to be that hard to make that change. So I'm not really sure what the developers are doing. I know they tried to nerf it, but that definitely has not worked. Life on hit is still very, 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 very strong. And, you know, I think this is kind of... This line right here, I think, is mainly going to be because of life on hit. I think that is one of the main problems that this game has right now. And to turn this around, all that needs to happen is life on hit needs to be removed. That's going to be like one major thing, and the sooner they do that, the higher their chances are of bringing a little bit of the player base back and maybe making more players more inclined to play it. The thing about this game is that it's not like absolutely unique, you know? It's not like Tarkov that was, you know, completely unique for when it came out, or like how PUBG was completely unique for when it came out. In my opinion, Dark and Darker is, Dungeonborne is like a better version of Dark and Darker. There's lots and lots of quality of life stuff in Dungeonborne that just feel a lot better. I like the arcadey feel of Dungeonborne. I like that you get the hit markers and the damage numbers so you actually know what's happening in fights. I like that when you're in the lobby, using arrows doesn't fully consume the arrows. I like there's only 3 traders instead of like 15. There are a lot of things in Dungeonborne that I prefer to Dark and Darker, but the thing about it is that Dark and Darker was the original, right? So that's always going to maintain a lot of players, because it was kind of the first one to do, you know, like a medieval extraction shooter, let's say. So that's always going to have a pretty big player base, and Dungeonborne is obviously competing with that, right? So if this life on hit problem isn't fixed, at least a little bit soon. I think a lot of people are just going to transition to Dark and Darker instead. Whereas what you really want to be happening is you want the game to be in a good place in terms of balance, so that people from Dark and Darker come to Dungeonborne. That's going to be the main goal for whoever is making the game, for the devs here. And I don't think that's really what they're focusing on right now. I don't know if they're focusing on like new game modes or like new cosmetics just to make a little bit of money or something like that, but right now their focus really doesn't seem to be Life on Hit, because it's really not that hard to take out of the game, and it's really just collectively known to be a giant problem. I don't think this is going to be the type of thing they're looking at their data for and being like, oh yeah, you know what, this is fine, this isn't a problem, we can just let this be. So I can only imagine they're looking at the data, and I can only imagine the data we're showing Life on Hit is really strong, because it is. So I don't know why this isn't being looked at or anything like that. We know it was nerfed a while ago, but there's been no word since then. Another thing is the gear score. No one knows how the gear score matchmaking works, and the devs haven't said anything about how the gear score matchmaking works. So having just a little bit more communication from the devs regarding what's going on, regarding both of those two things in particular, I think would be very, very, very valuable. Just to have that transparency, really. I think that would be very, very cool to have. And both of those things, fixing Life on Hit and just being more transparent with how the gear score matchmaking works, would make these numbers go up. The final thing I think is that's a big issue, is that the way the legendary gear works is on like a global timer, so if you pick up a legendary thing, no one else can pick up a legendary thing until that global timer has like ended, and then only one person can pick up like one more legendary thing, and then the timer starts again. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure it's something very, very, very similar to that, which is just an awful loot system. Like if you're getting 15 gear score, which is quite a lot if you don't have much gold, right? If you're not religiously playing the game and you don't have much gold, getting 15 gear score requires like a pretty hefty investment, right? And if you're getting 15 gear score and there's like a 0% chance of you getting something gold because the timer isn't finished yet, that just doesn't feel very good. So 3 things that I think can be done to make this go the other way, to make this start going up, to bring in more players, is to fix the Life on Hit, to fix the global timer on the legendary thing, and to be more transparent with the gear matchmaking. Those are the 3 main things, I think. Another thing that would be nice is to kind of buff the rogue again, because the rogue's in a really weird spot where its crossbow does insane amounts of damage, but it's not a rogue class. It's just like it's an archer instead of a rogue, and I don't think that it's in a very good spot right now. So there's going to be that, and there's going to be lots of other minor things that should be looked at, but those are the main ones. And if all of these get changed relatively quickly, like within the next week, or at maximum, I think within the next week or 2, I think that these numbers can be changed back. 10,000 concurrent players is still a lot, right? And if that changes, these numbers can start getting turned around. But if a week goes by, if 2 weeks go by, if 3 weeks and then a month goes by, and nothing is done about any or all of those 3 things, then I think that this is just going to keep going in a downwards direction, and I don't think it's going to be very good for the player base, and then people are just going to switch over to Dark and Darker. Unfortunately, I think that's just going to be how it is. This game isn't, you know, incredibly unique. It is very similar to Dark and Darker, so even though, like, with a game that's original, even if that has flaws, people will still play it because there's nothing else like it. Like Tarkov. Tarkov takes, you know, it takes 4 minutes to load into a game. That's not good, but there's nothing else really like it. It's the original, so people still play it, right? Unfortunately, Dungeonborne isn't in the position where it's the original game, so having pretty poor communication, I would say, and having poor, you know, balancing and stuff like that, is just going to cause the downfall of the game. Little things like that, they add up, they build up over time. Someone dies to Life on Hit, they keep dying to Life on Hit. That's not very fun for that player. They switch to Dark and Darker, right? That's going to be how it works. So, you know, yeah, that's just what I think is the problem right now with Dark and Darker. I think that's why it's been having a trend of losing players. And yes, obviously, any free game that comes out on Steam is going to have a lot of players at launch, and it's going to lose a lot of players at launch because not everyone's going to stay in the game. But this is very clearly, like, going down a lot right? So I am aware that it's a new game, it's a new free game, and lots of people are playing it, and then lots of people are leaving it. But I think right now, the game's going to keep going down unless something is changed. And I've already said all of the things that I think can be changed to turn this around. So there you go. I just wanted to go on a little bit of a rant about this, really. Because I like this game. I like this game a lot. I think it's quite fun. Especially if you're playing it with teammates, because there's a lot of kind of team tactics in it. And I like the competitive mode as well as the casual mode. I think it's cool. I do think it is better than Dark and Darker. I much prefer it to Dark and Darker. It's much easier to understand what's going on, and I feel like there's less luck involved. So I much prefer this to Dark and Darker. But in saying that, if this doesn't get fixed, then I do think that the game might start to die off a little bit more. So this is really just a rant, but that's just my thoughts on everything. I know a lot of people on the Reddit and on the Discord aren't happy with yesterday's patch, which I think is completely fair because it wasn't a very good patch that didn't take into account what most of the players are asking for. And when that's a thing, that's never really a good sign. But you know, I'm hoping that Life on Hit gets fixed real soon, hoping all of the other stuff gets fixed real soon. And I'm hoping that, you know, we can go back to at least somewhat balanced games where you've got a chance of winning with any of the classes. And if the game gets to that spot, then it probably has a bright future ahead of it. But if it takes too long to get to that spot, then it's probably not going to have a bright future ahead of it. So, yeah, there you go. Thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. That is going to be it for this video. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Farewell.